Hey, what's going on, everybody? Al, nice to see you in the chat. Oh, what's that? Someone's going to be entering the studio here today. That's right. Welcome to the Superpilotish channel. My name is Graham Wilson, and today, right after this click, we're going to be talking to Dr. David Perrodin, school safety expert, all the way from the North Star Studios in Wisconsin. So,
Holy smokes, Graham!
hey,
I am here in
hey, David.
Wisconsin, where it was a record 97 degrees yesterday. It'll be about 95 today, but with all the planes flying overhead to the Experimental Aircraft Association event in Oshkosh, man, it's awesome. So, thank
Cool.
you for having me on the show,
Oh,
and
thank you.
thank you for just everything you've done with the Super Pilotage channel. I've learned a lot. I really have. And when you were a guest on my show, you shared the Decide model, and I'm bringing that forward into a class I'm teaching this fall for superintendents. So I appreciate your channel, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot for coming in here, David. And I see a few other people here in the chat. I'm sure they're also very happy to see you, Al and Dan Duval and Harold Cheeseburger. Yeah, so I figured today what we would talk about is because we got David here as our in studio, in house school safety expert. Now, this is a thing that he has his own Safety Doc podcast and Safety Doc channel on YouTube. And but he doesn't really get to talk about one of the things that he actually does a lot, which is ride his bicycle insane amounts of miles and keep in good shape that way. But it's one of those things that I don't know, like being in aviation myself, it's safety is it's an integral part of the aviation industry. And here we got a school safety expert, but we're probably going to hear a little bit today about bicycle safety too. And it's pretty hot out there where I am. So let's just start off with you, David, and maybe talk about a little bit of what kind of safety issues should we deal with these days. And I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, well, thanks. So let's touch on a few things. First is biking is one of my passions. Like I love biking, but not just any type of biking, distance biking. So I'm talking about 70 to 100 miles in a bike trek. And I know that sounds crazy. And Graham, it sounded absolutely crazy to me. When I did my first, well, when I was in college, right, I I had this Trek steel bike. It was this heavy bike, and I bike around campus and stuff like that. That's one thing, right? And as a kid, you have a bike, but about 10 years ago, I bought a newer bike, a road bike, and I did my first bike trek, and it was a whole 5 miles. Yeah, 5 miles total. And I was winded and I was exhausted, and I was like, I'll never do this again. I'm just worn out. And now I'm doing 70 to 100-mile bike treks on a fairly regular
That's out
basis.
of control. Tell me more.
So after the first ride, I was just I was out of shape, right? I mean, as probably most of us are, and it's not necessarily that you're way overweight or something like that, but cardiovascular, there's a lot of that comes into biking. So yeah, my first bike ride was actually pretty discouraging. My first distance ride, so I had this real fancy bike and I'm going to do this ride right after 5 miles. I'm totally wiped out, and legs are cramping and stuff like that. So what I did is I learned more about biking. So I read more about biking. Nikolai Razovayu, who was on the Soviet national team, is a friend of mine, and as a professional biker, he was giving me tips. Um, so let me tell you about some of the things that I learned about biking, because between 2013, when I kind of first started, 2014, I went from doing 5 miles to doing 100 miles and getting in the best shape of my life. Now, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
know. Now, David actually sent me a picture of him from 2014, but he
Right.
was all ripped and buff and like 0% body fat. So
Holy smokes, man. I was like
I don't know how to share that on here just yet,
yeah.
but take my word for it. Yeah, he was.
I
It looked
was
like he was doing a whole lot of cardio.
Yeah, but like that is my profile photo for everything, right? Like right that photo in 2014. But between 2014 and 2018, I was doing about 300 miles a week biking. So I live in Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin, and what I do is I bike rural country paved roads. So just to give you an idea, like I'm not biking through some forest on some things or BMX biking or whatever. So I have what's called a road bike, so they're a little bit heavier, about, road bike typically 21 gears. And so let me tell you about that. So one of the things I think people do too is they think they kind of psych themselves out first about biking. First of all, biking is awesome. It's now, I'm not talking about e-biking. I think there's a place for that. I just haven't like become more aware of that. But like traditional biking, I think it's great for your body. You're getting a lot of oxygen. You're out in nature. Your situational awareness improves because you have to monitor what's happening. Oh, is there a deer running across this field? Is there a hawk coming down? It's going to bite me on the shoulder. Is there a snake on the road? All of that stuff. So, so I bought a nice bike, and I would say, about $1,000 I put out for this bike, and since I've upgraded and things like that. But the barrier of entry to biking isn't that high. You can buy a used bike go to Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, and that stuff, and get a used decent bike for a couple $100. You don't need a fancy bike, and the thing is, you don't need a super lightweight bike for distance trekking. That's where I think people, if you're racing, right, like you want a super light bike, but people get in this whole thing of, oh, I have to have a light bike. Well, I pack 2 gallons of water every time I do a 70 to 100-mile ride. That's 16 pounds. So like,
Yeah, I was doing the calculation in my head. Okay,
so
gas is 6 pounds per gallon. Water's 8. Yeah, so
yeah, so I actually want the bike to be heavier to provide resistance to build up my strength. So, kind of getting used to those things. Um, but yeah, for the mindset, don't get defeated. That was one of my things. Be realistic and confident. You'll start out at maybe 5 miles, maybe 3 miles, whatever it is, and you can work up from there. And I remember I worked up to 40 miles, and I thought that was awesome. I did a 40-mile bike ride, and
I've never
then
done that. Sounds
yeah,
good.
so I thought this was super. And then I thought, well, I could do 50 or maybe 60, 70. Once you can hit 40, the jump from 40 to 70 doesn't it's not that big, right? So like 0 to 40 is a big jump, but 40 to 70. So I started to do longer rides and go to like 50, 60. And then I start to do from 70. 70 is a very long ride. I went to 100 miles, and I've done 100 miles a few times. Um, so again, the mindset is be realistic. Like you're going to start out maybe at 4 or 5 miles, and you can go however far you want. But like 40 miles is pretty easy. Once you start biking, your body gets used to it. Your body adjusts to that. And if you really want to go crazy, you can do like 70 or 100 miles. I personally bike solo. I don't bike with other people because one, I don't want to I don't want to be engaged in conversation for 10 hours, with another person like biking next to you, like, hey, what do you think about this Graham Wilson show? I'm like, it's awesome, but I can say that for like 5 hours, and then I got to talk about something else. But and then I don't like the pacing. Because I biked with other people, and then you have to match their pace, they match your pace, and I just don't want to deal with that. And there might be something I want to stop off and kind of check out. Like there's Indian effigy mounds where I bike that are 1,000 years old, and maybe the other person or people don't want to do that. So I'm solo, but it's a good thing. So, um, so Graham, the last couple of days here, it's been 97 yesterday, and it'll be 95 today. Those are days you would not want to bike, and it's humid. So there's this thing called wet bulb effect. And that's the other thing. So I live in Wisconsin.
Yeah, you were telling me about that.
Yes.
Go for it.
So wet bulb effect is if you have two thermometers, and this is just a regular thermometer, and here's a thermometer that you would put a wet muslin cloth over. So meteorologists do this, and they blow a fan over it. And as the water evaporates, it should start to, from this muslin cloth, it should suck heat from that thermometer. And this thermometer should drop. So if this one is 85 degrees, this one should drop to like 75. If this one after an hour is still 85 degrees, it means this isn't evaporating. and also on your skin, your sweat wouldn't evaporate, right? So yesterday or today, if humidity is above 70%, like it's dangerous to go bike riding because the humidity, the sweat isn't evaporating. You start to warm, and you can actually like kind of overheat. So that's probably the biggest thing, is to know the humidity. This thing called wet bulb effect, and you can type it in, and it's your local weather channel might have it. But otherwise, once you get up, it's not the heat, it's the humidity. If it's 80 degrees and 80% humidity, I wouldn't bike that day. If it's 85 and 50 degrees, boom, I'd be out there. So it's this thing called wet bulb effect. Um, so yeah, if it's humid, or if you're going to bike when it's humid, just do a short ride, short ride, 20 miles and back. Your body doesn't evaporate.
Yeah, just a
And
short ride, 20 miles. Okay.
yeah, you don't want to do a distance ride. I mean, you don't want to be that person who's like, hey, I biked whatever, because, that's just stupid, right? You have to understand with your body, you don't want to put yourself in that situation. So that's another part of biking, is when I bike, I also have a couple checkpoints. So the first one is 4 miles on my ride. And then the next one is about 10 miles, where I get off and walk around the bike and things. And if I don't feel right, like maybe that ride will stop today. Maybe it's just not the day to bike. I'm not feeling, or something that's a little quirky with the bike. I'm hearing some click every time, I'm going through the pedals. Maybe it's something weird with the cassette. So have a couple like early checkpoints where you can get into things and just be like, today's good or today's not going to happen. If it does, and if you're like, any question, like, I'm not sure how I feel today, I feel like I could puke. Well, then, like, turn around.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't need to be, this isn't the crucible.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in my head, there's a lot of similarities between what you're saying and the way that people actually fly airplanes. Once you get going,
right.
you can, after a little while, you take off, you'll do like a cruise check where like, okay, I'm cruising along. Is everything working right here? No. Okay. Turn around, go back to the airport. So, I mean, I guess it's kind of like you could kind of do that on a bicycle too. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I think people should. And sometimes people yell at and like, hey, like if you were a pilot, you'd keep going. And I'd be like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm not.
Well, if you run out of gas on a bicycle, it's not such a big deal. Plane's a different story.
I kind of get that, got to just deal with that. I'm like, well, I'm not a pilot, so, but, so and the other thing is like personally, like windy days, I don't like biking on windy days because, the helmet, you just get a lot of wind. So this is my helmet right here.
Show and tell. We like that on the superpilotish channel.
And I got my gloves and a whole bunch of lights in here that'll kind of show different. So I replace my helmet about every 5 years unless I've wiped out and I cracked a helmet in an accident. So that one got replaced. So this is a nicer Bontrager helmet, and it has what's called a MIP system inside. So if you do hit something, it's supposed to twist, and that is supposed to lessen the impact. I don't know. The brand new helmets it looks like corrugated cardboard inside, but made out of plastic. The newest ones out there. So this is kind of like a last generation style. I have my name in here. You can't see it. It's like over here. It's taped up. And so anybody finds me along the road, and they take the helmet off, they're like, okay, here's the guy, and here's his phone number. And then I have on the back, there's a light. This is USB, and this thing will go 12 hours.
Is that your own personal aftermarket?
It is. It's kind of, now it's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned that, Graham, because the new helmets come with the attachments already built in.
Oh.
I was checking out helmets in June, and they have a mount for a light or a camera on the top. Like that's pretty standard on the higher end helmets, and a mount for the light. So this is an aftermarket, but it's a cat eye, and cat eye is really good as far as like battery life and just reliability. So if you are going to distance bike, like put a little money into your lighting system, because you're just going to get better battery results. So this is it. I added the stripes, by the way. These are reflective, and these are aftermarket. So these are all my design.
There you go.
So, but this is an awesome helmet. It's a Bontrager helmet. Helmet like this will maybe run you $80 to $100 and should last you 3 to 4. See, has a visor, which I tend to like. So as So as we're kind of into, well, let me get back to gear in just a second. So let me
Sure.
talk about we talked about weather, nutrition. So I'll tell you, I can get off a 100-mile bike ride and get off the bike, put it away, and walk in the house and feel fine. I don't have to take a nap. My legs aren't cramping up and things like that.
Yeah, you were telling me that before, and I'm like, what? How could that be possible?
It wasn't always the case because, oh my goodness, like I was dealing with that, and you start to realize it's nutrition, right? It's really nutrition. Now there are some things like if your knees hurt, your bike seat is probably too low, and how you're pedaling. I mean, there's some things like you have to kind of figure out. Um, but if your legs are cramping and you're just having overall, kind of like body cramps, your electrolytes are getting messed up, and you've got to change how you prep for your ride with nutrition and during the ride.
Huh.
Here's one thing. This is a 24-ounce cup of coffee. Oh, Graham, look at this. It's hot. This one's empty though. But this is, and professional cyclists will do this, and competitive cyclists. Caffeine kind of takes over your system right away for maybe that first 5 to 10 miles, and it's gives you this boost. And when coffee wears off, it also has a pseudo hydrating effect, although they'll say, I guess. But you don't really notice it that much, right? So it's not like you're eating a bag of Skittles and that gets metabolized as sugar. This is caffeine. So I will always do a 24-ounce black coffee an hour before ride.
Huh.
So right there, drinking lots of water. So I will drink the day before. I'll try to drink well over a gallon of water. When I'm biking, if I'm doing 7,200 miles, 70 to 100 miles, I'll bring the coconut. These are all non-paid product sponsors, so you don't have to put the sponsor thing on the show. Like
Yeah,
stock. If I were,
not yet. I'm not a corporate whore yet, but that'd be nice if I could be.
if you're investing right here, yeah, whatever, in Tetra Pak, go for it. But so I have a friend who runs marathons, like the Boston Marathon and stuff, and said this is the stuff. So this is coconut water. It's high in electrolytes. And it really has made a difference. So I'll bring this along. This is a larger one. They come in smaller ones. And of
Have
course,
you ever tried like just doing regular Gatorade or anything like
holy smokes, look at this product placement. Wow. Look, Graham's ahead of the curve here. So yeah,
we
I do.
didn't plan that either.
Wow. Look at that. I got 5 screens over here, and the stock of Gatorade just went up $7. But yeah, I bring Gatorade, a smaller bottle. And right, I do think, there's the benefit of obviously Gatorade's research and electrolytes and things like that. But I don't go bigger than this. The rest of what I have is all water. But yes, for electrolytes, which is kind of the salts in your system. I mean, like if it's a hot day and I'm biking, like my skin, the salt crystals will start to show up on my skin. Like I'll come home and you have to scrape it off. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty crazy. But and then again, just you can buy these at Walmart. There's no all these. There's no kind
Now,
of.
when you're carrying all this water, I'm just thinking about like, do you have a trailer behind you with a cooler or something like that?
So I
How
don't.
does that fit on?
I don't. So this is one of my main bags. So this one slides on and locks on. It's a toe peak bag. So inside of this bag, so I do have separate water bottles. I have 3 water bottles that I put on the bike, and then the rest of the water somehow gets attached here and then also in the back of this bag. So this is it. This is the main bag, of course, with my little reflective thing. Inside of this, it expands upward. So this is a pretty big bag. I don't know if the camera really does
And
it
that
justice.
just snaps right onto
I have a special
rack that's attached to your bicycle.
I have a special rack, and once it latches on, it's good. I don't have to do anything else with it. And it has a little mesh thing here, so I can stick bananas on the top. So right now in this one, I've got a lot of room. I can stick. I have different water containers that fit into here to kind of get me up to a gallon. My bike lock is in here, which I rarely use, but like if I, for some reason, had to abandon the bike, I would probably lock it up. And here's something: everybody should pack Rolaids. Like this is like a $2 pack of Rolaids and antacid, because after drinking coffee and the different things while you're biking, your stomach can kind of turn sour at times.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be 20 miles out or 20 miles away from home and just have like this acidy feeling in your stomach.
I
So
never would have thought about that, but
I didn't.
now that I'm getting old, I'm like, yeah, good idea, Doc.
Something I wouldn't have needed when I was younger. And then, of course, inside of here, so this is a multi-tool. And through this multi-tool, specifically made for bikes, this one is the Alien 2. And I can split this apart and do things. But I mean, I can pretty much fix most things on the bike. I have my change of tire, and my pump is permanently attached to the bike, so I don't have that available. But the most common wrenches if things are going wrong. There's not a lot that can go wrong when you're biking. It's probably mostly like a flat tire, but I have used this to tighten up the derailleur or stuff like that when I'm out. So, but yeah, this is called an Alien 2.
So how have you ever had very many flat tires on these big rides?
No, I think it's like one time it's happened, so pretty rare. The thing with a flat tire is they will sell CO2 cartridges so you can inflate the tire, but I prefer to have a pump. And also in case like I get biking maybe and I notice I want to the tires need a little more air pressure, I can just quickly go in there, where a CO2 cartridge is not as nimble, I guess, with that. But
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like I'm not a big fan of those CO2 cartridges either.
right.
Like I have one for my motorcycle, but it's like realistically, I'd never use it because
Right.
once it's out. Well, my tire's still flat, but at least if you got a pump, you could pump it a little extra.
Yeah.
You
So I
know.
have a special pump. It's mounted right on the bike, and then a spare. So I actually have a couple spare tires downstairs if I needed to, and I have some Gorilla Tape. Not here; it's in a different bag. But the Gorilla Tape would be so if you had something that caused a cut in your tire, where then when you took the tire off, you could tape it from the inside, so it wasn't interfering with the tube, just to kind of get you home. So like a
Yeah.
small thing of Gorilla Tape is really good. And then I pack this. This is an elastic ace bandage, and I change this out every 2 years. I was in a really bad bike accident and could have used this a couple of years ago.
Wow. Yeah,
Um,
that's kind of what I was kind of wondering here too, Doc. That the so all this knowledge that you've gotten is this pretty much because of oops, that didn't work. I better bring this. Oops, that didn't work. I better bring this. Or was that kind of a combination of that and research you've done or people
oh,
you've talked to?
kind of a combination. Nikolai Razavayu, the Olympic cyclist from the Soviet Union, was giving me some pointers, and just some other things I had learned from forums and talking to people. So, do you have any idea what this is? So, this is in the side of the bag.
I couldn't tell you, man.
All right, it's an airplane. Look at this. There's the wings. There it is. So no, it's not.
Well, that looks about as good as the airplanes I make in my basement.
Yeah, it's a splint. So
Yeah.
so having a splint, or like if you were biking and somebody was out there and they wiped out and broke an arm or a leg, like this is super easy to use. I got it off Amazon. It was recommended by another cyclist. It gives little directions on how to use it. But yeah, so things, kind of one-time use, super light, so it fits in the side. But yeah, carrying a splint is a big thing. And then I have, hopefully over here, so I have different bags on the bike that have different. Oh, so this one has my pump. So right here is my pump. So pretty
Oh yeah.
cool. And then, all right, so ice pack, right?
Have you ever had to use that?
Yes, one time I used an ice pack. These are disposable. Again, you can buy these at a Walmart type store pretty cheap. So the thing is, you might be thinking, oh, use an ice pack in case you get a, wipe out, you get a bruise on your arm or
Yeah,
something
or
like
like
that.
keep swelling down or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's not the reason I bring it. I bring it
Oh,
because if I'm overheating,
oh yeah.
which should be very rare, but if I sense like that I'm overheating, I would get off the bike, get in the shade, and activate the ice pack and put it on my neck. So your carotid artery then is
Yeah.
transferring cooler blood to your
Yeah.
brain,
Makes sense.
and it's a way to cool you down. So that is why I bring the ice pack. Really is because of overheating.
Now with
And
that ice pack, that got me thinking there, David. Now you used to be a volunteer firefighter, right?
yeah, yeah.
And did you find out about that ice pack as part of your training as a volunteer firefighter? Maybe.
Um, Probably
'Cause,
not.
I mean, those.
No,
Well,
I don't think I did.
yeah.
Although,
Because I
like,
was thinking those firefighters. I mean, if you're out in that type of weather that's there right now, man, you'd be sweating like crazy in all the gear.
right. And one of the things in first aid, right? Well, I've instructed a lot of first aid class. Well, not I shouldn't say that. I've instructed first aid and CPR, kind of awareness trainings. Not that I'm certified in that, but like as a school administrator, right? You want people to know where your first aid kits are and
Right.
who has
Yeah.
permission to use things like that. So, but again, this maybe this was from a biking forum, or this was just something I had picked up, but it was what I also have this in my car. I have a couple ice packs in my car, right? Because if you were upon a scene and there was an accident, right, and you were tending to somebody, it would seem advantageous to try to cool them down if it was a hot environment. I also have blankets to put on people, right, in case it's
Hmm.
cooler. But so yeah, the ice pack is something new, and then I have this, which I got from my local kind of big box store, and it's just this crazy bendy thing that has a loop in it. And the reason I have this is like, what if I have to attach something to my bike? What if I wipe out and the only way I can get the cassette or pedal or something to work is to like just rig it up. So
Yeah.
this is an emergency, and I've used this in the past.
Oh, really?
And yeah, works great
Kind of
for
like
what
farmers with their baling wire. They can use that for everything.
it is. It is much like that. So you can buy. I bought this one at Menards. It's like $1. You never know when you're going to need it, but when you need it, like you'll be glad that you had it. So those are a few things kind of from the bag. I think I have multiple bags that are on. This is the biggest one. Um, and it's really cool. It has the water in the back, but I also do this. I try to be highly visible.
Yep.
So
Nice
this
and
just
safe.
hangs off and looks like a little farmer thing. When I'm going out, I am wearing, of course, my high vis. I have different versions of this shirt, and then they have pockets in the back. Usually, I'll
Oh,
just throw like a handkerchief in the pocket because you probably find your nose runs a lot when you're riding because of the different pollen and stuff. But
hmm.
um, so yeah, this one is pretty faded. Um, Bike gloves, right? These are reflective. Bike gloves are pretty cheap. Check the padding. Like you don't have to go very expensive, but like put something on and like try handlebars at a bike just to make sure that the padding is like hitting on the handlebars where you want. These
Hmm.
get real stinky, so like just soap
Yeah,
and water.
motorcycle gloves do the same thing.
Oh God,
Yeah.
these things are pretty bad, but physically they're still in pretty good shape. So, um, and then I have a variety of lights, so they all charge on USB ports. So when I get home, like I have to spend the next day like charging stuff. So this is a headlight, and I bike during the day. I use it for visibility, so we can
Okay,
kind of
so
see
do
like
you keep the light on even during the daytime, eh?
absolutely, yep, and it does the flash pattern. This is a Bontrager Ion 450R. So I bought this one new this year. They'll last a couple of years, and the batteries you just don't hold the charge. Um, but yeah, really nice, easy to put on handlebars. Just like clicks over. This is my rear light, which is this tiny little cube, right? I bought this one in June, and this one will stay charged for maybe like 10 hours. on this type of setting.
Hmm.
And then I always have a backup set of lights. So like here's some backup lights that are charged and ready to go for the
Now
back.
that's amazing. Now when I was a kid, when we wanted to have like a light on our bike, we had this little thing that would rub against the tire and charge a little
I
timer
had
with
that
it.
too. Man,
Generation
I
X for the win. And then it's like it made it so hard to pedal, and I was like, I don't ever want to have a light on my bike. But
oh my God. Yeah, I
kids
had
these
those.
days, they got it easy.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep, I had the whole
And then the
setup.
faster you go, more noise it makes too. So
Yeah, and it would wear on the side of the tire, like wherever you had that thing that was making
yeah,
contact. And um,
yeah.
and kind of like, maybe one of the other things here is like we talked oh, shoes. So people make mistake when they go biking and they'll be like, oh, I'm going to wear like these running shoes or whatever. No, you want your energy when you're pressing down on the pedal to go to the pedal. So wear like hard sole shoes. You
Hmm.
can get training shoes, take the inserts out, but you do not want to wear running shoes because your energy goes into compressing the foam and then compressing the foam, and that will tire you out. It will just be a real um, you'll be turned off on biking if you don't
Huh.
use these
So
hard sole
have
shoes.
you noticed the difference yourself
Oh
between
God,
like
yes.
yeah?
Yeah, yeah. I ride completely with hard sole. Just a pair of like a cross training shoe that's all leather, by the way, so it doesn't rip out. And then I took all of the padding out of it, and
Hmm.
right, because you want your energy to immediately go into the pedal. So
Right.
don't be like, oh, I got to get these, whatever, big puffy things, because your energy is going to be spent compressing that down before
Yeah,
it
that
hits the
makes
pedal.
sense.
Um, so yeah, so those are some of the big things: high vis, flat bear, and one of the things like I don't bring, but maybe you want to, is an umbrella. No,
What would you need that for, man?
no, man. Actually, I wouldn't bring in umbrellas. And that's another thing is like know the weather, like check the weather out. And if it's iffy, if it's like, oh, at 2 o'clock there's a 60% chance of like thunderstorms. Well, make sure make sure you're not out biking at 2 o'clock then. It's pretty predictable, the
Yeah, when it
weather.
comes to stuff like that, I end up canceling a lot of flights.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's the thing with biking. Like, don't
I did
risk it.
that yesterday with one of my students. I'm teaching how to fly. Of course, it clears right up. Beautiful day, and I'm like, oh man. But,
Oh my goodness. So I've had some crazy, I had a crazy ride last year. My last ride of the year was in October, and it started out great. And by the end, it was like, like sleet and high winds. And I'm like, this sucks. And it's just one of those weird days. But um,
yeah.
if you are doing a bike check too. So I'll kind of get things ready the day before, go over the bike, make sure the chain, everything is lubed. But the day of the bike is when you check the tires and you're checking the brakes and wiping the brakes down. And the reason is, your tires pressure, these are high pressure tires. Um, they can change overnight. Or if
Yeah,
you have
with temperature and everything. Yeah.
right. So that before I ride, so I'll try to be out, like between 7 and 8 in the morning. I check the pressure and make sure I'm setting the pressure of the tires that morning before I ride. I'm checking all my lights. Again, don't lube the chain, because if you're going to bike 100 miles, that lube is going to come off the chain and end up all over like you and the bike and stuff like that. So
Something tells me you learned that one by me.
yeah, that's not a good idea. So get that done ahead of time. Yeah, just check that you have lights and that you have extra lights. Your first 8 items. Just kind of go through your pack. Um, so the actual ride, one of the cool things is, so this isn't medical advice, but I believe a distance bike ride is one of the best health indicators out there. You're checking, I'm monitoring my cardiovascular. Am I having a hard time breathing? Am I feeling lightheaded? Am I losing my balance? Am I not able to orient to where I am? Like, where am I? Like, I'm not sure. Um, am I having these, weird crackling noises in my knees or
Mm.
something in my back?
Do you use any of those fancy apps and sensors
I
and
don't.
stuff like that?
I don't.
Yeah.
I
People do that
initially
kind of stuff. I don't know.
I initially bought something like that you wore, and it would like give your heartbeat, and it just it didn't always pair with the computer, and I don't. I have a nice cat eye um, computer on my bike, which will do the distance and all that, but it's not Wi-Fi. It doesn't go to my phone. It's not GPS. I don't do any of that stuff.
Hmm.
I don't map. I don't come home and say, well, here's a printout of the map of your ride. I'm just not into that. And I just don't like having that information out there. Like, right. I,
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I,
understandable. Yeah.
yeah, I
Well,
just,
especially it's like something weird gets hacked somewhere
right.
somehow, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, your health insurance is denied. Why? Well, we got this showed up on some server over in Thailand.
Yeah.
Like,
And I don't need to compete with people because all those people in Canada they beat me. They're faster, but
not me, man.
so
Maybe I don't
so,
know.
but that's a good point because you can do that, and if you're into that, it easily interfaces with the bike. I don't usually record my bike rides, but
Mm.
again, some people do, and I
Well,
think there's
you did say you had a like a little cat eye, like a little speedometer kind of thing, or
yeah, it
'cause I
is.
know before we did our show here, David and I were talking about well, we were kind of exchanging some emails and that, and David was saying that he usually goes at 12 miles per hour. Is that right? Is that kind of the
Uh,
magic number?
it is. It is. So
And I was like, because when I was reading that, and I was thinking, where'd you get that 12 miles per hour number from?
so yeah.
Now
So
that's a nice calculator.
look,
So
this is an old calculator. I got this at my
I
first
got a
job.
solar powered one of those babies too, man. All right.
Yeah. I mean, this thing is easily 40 years old, so it's got my name on the bottom, here.
Nice.
So, uh, yeah, 12. So how fast do you have to ride? And there'll be times, not on a distance ride. A distance ride, the only thing I'm trying to do is enjoy the day. So I get up early. I want to be out between 7 and 8. I know it's going to take me between 8 and 10 hours to do the ride. And then it's usually, so if it's 100 miles, it's 50 miles out and 50 miles back. So at no point am I like 80 miles away from home. Um, and 12 miles an hour is a very realistic pace to keep on an a road bike where you're heavily loaded. 12 miles is a good pace to keep. So um, that's that's again, that's realistic. You can go a little faster. I wouldn't recommend kind of going slower, but I think 12 miles is realistic. So if you take 100 miles divided by 12, it's 8.3, but you got 8.3 hours. You have a couple stops in there, a little lunch and stuff like that. Um, so I take a break every hour, usually about 3 to 4 minutes, just get off the bike, stretch and um, things like that. So
Mhm.
take some water. Lunch for me is maybe 15 minutes, and I pack beef jerky. I pack Swedish fish and crackers, peanuts.
So
Peanuts.
how do you eat your sardines, man? Do you just like
So these never come
just
with me
flop
on
it in your mouth
the.
and you start stinking like a fish
Yeah,
for the rest of the day, or what?
I'll tell you, I love sardines. I love King Oscars. So I don't bring these on a trip because, as you indicated, they're kind of messy, and
Oh, okay. Oh,
I
that's the
don't.
day before you're eating those. That's
I
right.
will eat these the night before, and I'll eat these when I get back from a trip because they're very high in protein, and then also uh, with the electrolytes, and then what is it? The triglycerides, so it kind of like lubricates, the heart valves and stuff like that. So,
Oh,
um, so sardines are awesome. Your body turns these into power. Very high protein. Your body's going to be breaking down protein. But I don't bring these with me. I bring beef jerky, and beef jerky takes longer to digest when you're biking. So usually like eat it during the lunch or halfway. Um, and so beef jerky takes a while. It brings proteins in your system. The crackers are carbohydrates. They immediately bring energy back in. The Swedish fish are slow dissolved sugars, so that's a good thing. Bananas. I'll bring a green bananas in the
Wait,
morning.
when you're saying Swedish fish, are you meaning sardines or those little candy
No,
things?
those little candy fish, those
Oh,
little,
okay. There you
or you
go.
could use
I was
gummy
like,
bear.
wow,
Yeah.
dude, like, do the Swedes have some special, you know,
Wow.
genetically modified Swedish sardines or something? But okay, the little
Oh
fish
my
thing.
goodness.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are awesome.
Yeah, they are, and and that's where another, more advanced cyclists said, and they do this kind of slow dissolve in your system because you don't want to eat a bag of Skittles and then boom, hit the sugar rush, and then 15 minutes later, suddenly your body's like,
Yeah, you
whoa,
get the
like coming off
crash.
the crash.
So
So
the
you want to,
Swedish fish actually kind of modulate that.
it does, completely
Huh.
does,
Well, that's pretty
and
interesting.
then I eat I put together a little sack, a little Ziploc bag full of peanuts and cashews, and because nuts also dissolve a little bit slower and are providing some proteins into your body, so that's where I go. And then the carbs come straight out of like crackers or crackers and cheese. um and I'll also bring on
Man, all this talk about food and exercise and stuff, I'm getting thirsty.
yeah. Yeah, and also bring along a couple salt tablets. I'm not That's not a big thing that I do, but you can buy salt tablets. I've got one like right here, for example.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I've had to buy those before for first aid kits for the airplanes.
yeah, yeah. So if you're cramping, it probably means that you're running low on your salts are getting low and depleted, and you probably can see the salt on your skin. So a salt tablet can help you out with that. So that's something else I've learned. So yeah, and then actually when I'm out, probably another thing is be alert for vehicles and dogs. So one thing is I bring an MP3 player and I have an external JBL speaker that I put on top of this bag so I can listen to podcasts and things like that. But I don't put anything in my ears because I want to be able to hear cars. Um, and I want to hear what's happening around me. So I never put buds in my ears. Um, but you do get probably the biggest thing about biking is you get bored. Yeah, even if it's like an awesome, beautiful day, and like here, like I biked out and all the sunflowers are facing me, and you come back and they're facing you because they turned the other way. But after 4 or 5 hours, you just kind of your mind just kind of gets bored, right? So I I download podcasts, and then I have a JBL small external speaker, which will go for easily 5-6 hours because it's just voice, right?
Mm,
And then I put that in the bag and the mesh in the back, and then I can hear it, but I can also hear what's going on around me.
yeah.
Um, so and but be alert for dogs. That's it. One thing I need to change is I need to get like a mace or some dog spray because last week when I was biking and I'm like I hear pat 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 pat. I'm like I'm being chased by a dog. I look around and yeah, and I was able to outrun. I'll bike this dog because it wasn't that big and it wasn't that dedicated to taking me out. But that's kind of the situation. I've run into a lot of snakes when I bike. Um, uh, Eagles, hawks, things like that, which are all kind of manageable. But if
Mm.
you have coming off a property, like a large dog, um, if you can't outrun it, your options start to narrow pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah. Never thought
So
about that. Anytime I've been in the country with a car or motorcycle, it's just give it the gas and the.
yeah,
It's amazing how tenacious those dogs can be, though. They can they could chase you for like a good long, like full tilted.
right,
Long
right. I'm like,
way.
I was looking back at this dog, and I'm like, listen, like you and I both know you're not going to close the gap here, and I got like kind of downhill here, and it's pretty much over. Like I understand you're trying to make it look good, but
It's like, come on, dog, take the L.
take the L. I've got 8 gears ahead of me here, and I just had some Gatorade, but um, yeah. So anybody out there though, I mean, I never thought I could do this. I never ever thought I could bike 10, 15 miles, right? And then suddenly get up to 40, and it can be whatever you want. Like 40 miles is a really good ride. Like a 40-mile ride is my most common ride. And a ride like that is, between 3 hours, 4 hours, depending upon what you want to do, what you want to see. And that's terrific. Like that's awesome. and I'll reserve if I know it's going to be really great weather and I've got the time to maybe then do like a set. I'll never, I've got to work up to that. Like the start of the season in Wisconsin is May because otherwise it's snow and ice and things like that. And that's not my
Yeah.
biking weather.
Same as around here, kind of. Yeah.
So I need to get well into June before I'm cranking up to 70 or 100 miles. Um, but man, it just for your mind, like your mind just kind of everything spills out and you're just like, I'll spend time thinking about, okay, like where is the sun currently like hitting my body, like up on the shoulder, and like how do my toes feel? How do my hands feel? Like you just kind of do this assessment and what's around you. And because I'm biking in the country, we have sandhill cranes and these beautiful farms and so there's this right therapeutic part of it. It's a solitude part of it. And the fitness is just kind of it's hard to have something comparable to like a 7 or 8 hour bike ride because if you're
Mhm.
running you're probably banging up your knees a little bit more and um, but again I think it's one of the best indicators for health because when I come home I'm like, well, if I had XYZ condition, I'm sure that would have shown up at some
Yeah.
point, right? I mean,
Yeah,
like
you would have been taking an ambulance home. Hey, I
my
better go.
AC,
Yeah.
yeah, my ACL's bad. That would I would have picked up on that. So it really
Hmm.
serves, and you get to meet people along the way. Like there are certain people on certain routes, you get to know. And one thing too is I know the places to stop if I need water or supplies. Like there's this little bar out by a fishing area, right? So like you can stop there and refill your water if you have to. So I think it's awesome. Um, so one thing is I had a really significant bike crash. I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, where it destroyed a lot of the bike. Like most of the bike had to be completely rebuilt, and I had
Ooh.
a concussion, pretty intense concussion. Um, it was solo. It was on newly paved road where they put the tar down and they put the stones on top of it. And then I was coming back, and the sun was hitting the stuff in a certain way, and I just lost control of the bike. But I was all cut up and bleeding and stuff, and it messed me up for a couple of weeks. I have like a lot of scars still from that.
Hmm.
Um, and I was able to work with the bike to like get one gear so I could still like get home from where I was. And I went to the hospital like that night and was that. Then I watched like the trilogy of Batman, the Batman like with Nolan and The Dark Knight Rises. Did you watch it with a concussion after a major accident? That's crazy. It's like you're part of the movie. And then uh, and and I was like, "Holy smokes, man! That was
Oh, Batman looks cool, man.
that
Oh,
was crazy." And I remember like
I want a
drink,
Batmobile like that.
holy smoke! So the proper equipment, like my gloves, really kind of saved my hands. The helmet cracked. Yeah, like I said, most of the bike had to be rebuilt. And then also I Lita Kenny on my show, and she's a de-witcher, so she helps people get rid of paranormal problems, right? And I
Right?
said to her, I said, one thing I like to do is to bike through these cemeteries, especially these rural cemeteries. And she's like, whoa, never do that. Like you're
Hmm.
already worn down from biking and like restless spirits can latch onto you because you're not at full capacity energy. And
Hmm.
and it actually changed. Like from now on, I kind of don't do that just because Lita was so passionate. Like, you told somebody you did and they're like, you did
Well,
what?
it's what you can believe what you want to believe about spirits and stuff like that, but there's like the placebo effect or the if you're oh I or it's like whenever you're telling yourself, oh, I don't want to stub my toe, I don't want to stub my toe, I don't want to stub my toe, and then you stub your toe. Like it's like it'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, the bad spirits are gonna make me wipe out, and then you wipe out, or something. So
Well, I don't. Yeah, and she's like, well, they can
avoid the hex or the jinx.
latch onto you and you like visit your
Yeah.
home and stuff. I'm like, well, I don't need to be dealing with that. So,
Yeah.
but on my way out, there is a cemetery I stop at, and that's my first stop. And it's wide open, and usually like I'm picking up stuff because there's been a windstorm, some like putting people's flags back where they should be, or flowers, and then out in the country there's kind of an open area with a small cemetery, and that actually is another place to kind of stop and walk around. So those are both like good energy, but yeah, I've kind of limited my my exposure to like having paranormal spirits latch onto me. But yeah, so that's it.
Well,
Anybody
I'm
can
glad you're
do
not
it.
possessed there, David.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, but
Not
you know
that
what?
I'm.
There's something weird about that too. Is like I'm not superstitious about anything, except for when I talk about riding a motorcycle. I've never had an accident yet.
Oh, okay.
Knock on wood. I have to knock on wood. It's one of those things. It's been working for me for years. Well, that and driving safely and slowly. But,
Oh, right, right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that because yeah, and that was the only accident, and again, it was a solo, and it was just this kind of freak thing that happened for me. So, yeah, just a lot of scars from that one, and
oh,
I didn't know if I had broken bones, and um, I was bleeding a lot. Like as I came home, then I realized like, yeah, I had to get to the doctor like kind of immediately. But um, that stuff happens. I mean, it can happen anywhere
mhm.
you're at. There was one time, Graham, I was out biking, and I was at the top of a hill, and down below this a guy on a motorcycle missed a corner and went off into like this
Ooh.
field and wiped out.
Uh,
And so I'm looking down and I'm like, whoa, should I go down and help this guy? Like, is he just able to get up on the bike and stuff? And then he got up on the bike and he kind of like waved me off, like, I don't need your assistance. And then like this truck shows up like 5 minutes later to pick him up. And he kept like watching me and he's like, dude, don't call 911. Like,
he
just
stole a bike or something.
I don't know, man. I'm just like, I don't want any
Oh,
problem
you know what?
here.
I bet she didn't have any insurance or his plate was no good or something.
Something. Canadian license plate is all I got. I took a picture and I zoomed in. It was a it's a
No, that wasn't me.
it was a Canadian license plate. And the guy's just like, stay up there, like everything's good. And I'm like, I'm not sure everything's good,
Yeah,
but I
that's right.
will keep
I was
going.
reading a statistic about there's something about like guys that have accidents on motorcycles. There's like a disproportionate amount of them have like no insurance and improperly plated. Like they'll just I'll buy this bike, I'll get a
Yeah.
plate off of this one, slap it on, and then there's no. I don't know what it's like in Wisconsin for motorcycles, but here to get a license, you have to get it safety checked and make sure the brakes are good, lights, all that other stuff. So it's probably I think could be like that there, but it's like if you just like don't do that, just go riding around. Well,
There was
uh,
something right. There was something off on that, and
yeah.
and so I see that Wrench
Well, I saw once I was following someone in a car, and then the car in front of him rear-ended somebody. You heard the screech and the bang, and I
right,
was like, "Oh my god!" And
right.
as soon as I looked out, some guy just ran off in the car. It's like crashes the car and just books it. He's like, I'm out of here.
Holy
Like I don't know if
smokes!
it could have been drunk or something like that.
Yeah,
Too. You never know.
yeah.
But,
That's a and thankfully, like I've had very few uneasy experiences biking. Like where somebody drives by you and then suddenly they pull in like a mile ahead and wait for you to pass or
well,
something.
yeah,
Like,
I was going to ask you about that too. If you're riding so many long miles, usually on the backcountry roads, how was the traffic for
it's
that? Or
it,
do you plan your route so
I
that
I do.
you avoid that? Or
I do because I live close. I have to cross the interstate to start my bike ride, an overpass. And I live close to Wisconsin Dells, which is this big water park theme thing in summer, and people come up. So one of the things is Fridays in summer, I won't bike because people, are using their Garmin's or GPS and are taking shortcuts, which then takes them out onto these roads. So pretty much that day I just like block off. I won't bike on Fridays. Um, and otherwise there can be times when I can go an hour and not see anybody except some dude on a tractor. I mean, it gets to be that rural that fast.
oh, not bad.
Um, So very, very slim on traffic. And again, I have all of those lights going on, the front and back because I want to be visible. I want to stand out. We had, I think 2 years ago, we had two people killed in separate bike accidents during the day in my county. So, you just want to make, and I have a mirror on my bike too, which I added about 5 years ago. So, I'm always checking to see what's coming up behind me. But typically, people are very respectful. They're pulling out. UPS people always do the honk on the horn, honk honk before they come up behind you.
Oh yeah.
Um, but yeah, if there's, be aware of what's happening. And I did have like this kind of group of like high schoolers who are kind of like, yelling at me and stuff. And at one point I was like, what do I got to do? I have to like ditch and head into the woods here? Am I going to, what's going to happen here? But yeah, for the most part, again, I think it's more just having awareness of the animals, so, specifically dogs.
Yeah.
I've got to figure that out a little bit more, but I mean, it's just wonderful. You come home from a ride, and if you've done the the correct job of, and it'll take a while to figure out like, oh, should I pack more crackers, carbohydrates, because I was feeling a little bit down on my ride, or do I need to, whatever, more water. You can get those things kind of figured out and pretty close. But I could get home and I could do everything I wanted to do. I didn't have to like take a big
Hmm.
nap. I didn't have to like the next day I wasn't sore. So it's just so fun to be out riding, right?
Yeah. And one other little probably a last little bike question for you
Sure.
here is uh excuse me. So how long did it take you before you could get up to like a pretty long ride? Like say you start from zero,
Right.
like I'm all out of shape, and then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, hey, I did 20 miles.
Yeah, I've got those pictures, sure. So 2013 was when I did like the 5 miles. I was wiped out and I was pretty discouraged. And over 2013, I probably started to work by going out twice a week riding. Um, I could get up to 20, 25 miles by the end of 2013 biking season for me, which would be October. So like May to October, I went from 5 miles to 20 or 25 miles. And that's at a pretty slow, easygoing pace, pretty level terrain. In 2014, then that was the big jump. I kind of started off at 20 miles and then I was able to hit 40, maybe 3, 4 weeks later. And then I just said, I want to try longer. So I just went 60, 70 miles. And by the end of that year, I was doing 100. And then between 2014 and 2018, I'd be getting in, 3 rides a year. That would be 100, most be 70. 100-mile ride also gets to be a little long, right? Unless you have
Yeah.
a real reason to do 100 miles. It was more like, can I do this?
Yeah.
70
Like
is
climbing
like,
the mountain because it's there.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it gets to be like, well, I could do this or I could do that, and, um, so it did take a full year, and then also I guess in the off season, I was doing, a little bit of weightlifting. We have a high school track by us, and I wouldn't run it, but I would walk, like 6 miles, which would be 24 laps at night, and then it's just, kind of watching what you're eating. But the biking just kind of conditions you automatically. Like once you get one ride done, usually it just gets you ready to do a little bit longer ride. And
mm.
I think it's just not, it's making sure you do at least one ride a week or 2 rides a week. Because if you start to space it out, everything you've gained, like one weird thing in Wisconsin is like you can be in great shape in October and you have to just start over again in May because
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the way she goes.
ah,
So, okay, so I don't want to take up too much of your time here. We've been here for almost an hour, but I'd like to go through our chat
sure.
and just see if there's any little questions here. I can see, plus I get to use my fancy little StreamYard thing and make myself look all professional. So, yeah, so Wrench was wondering how long it takes to do 100 miles.
Um, That's a great question. So if we do the 100 divided by 12, it's 8.3, and then you're 8.3 hours. It takes me about 10 hours to
Hmm.
do 100 miles at my pace, and that's with periodic stops. So 10 hours. So try to leave at 7 in the morning and get home, at 5 at night. And in summer, it stays light until 8:30. So, but yeah. Um,
Okay. And then yeah, I'm just kind of scrolling through here to to see if there's any really important questions here. So any tomato or compost tea today? No, Rick. I'm in my basement, man. Can't you tell? Yeah, we're going back here. See, this is where most people go back and they catch all their super chats and stuff like that. But what have we got here? Okay, not a whole lot. We were gonna just to everybody that's in the chat there and anyone listening on YouTube, we were gonna talk about all this other stuff, and maybe you know what? I think we got it all kind of wrapped up about like bicycle safety.
I mean, yeah, if you
Like,
want, I mean, we can go like 5 minutes on, some emerging school
oh, that's
safety
right. There's
topics.
yeah, a couple more things here. I'm kind of new at this interview stuff, but anyways, there was a few things we wanted to talk about. We were thinking about talking about either deep fakes.
Yeah.
And before we get to that, I did want to mention there too that if you didn't know, David Perrodin has a couple of books out. The School of Errors was his first book that he did. When was that out? 2019, I think you published that one.
Yeah. So, paperback audiobook that I narrated out there.
Yeah.
So it's a good one.
So there's that one, and then there's also the Velocity of Information. I've read the School of Errors and listened to the Velocity of Information on the audiobook, and really interesting stuff. And one of the things that I recently read in the School of Errors, I kind of read them out of order. So I think if you were going to read them both, I'd say start off with the School of Errors and then Velocity of Information next. But the School of Errors was talking about this thing called mentioning institutional knowledge, which is where say there's a lot of turnover within schools, and so there's a lot of when it comes to either doing fire drills or anything like that. What we learned that like 10 years ago, but all those people have retired now. They've all
Right.
been replaced.
Right.
And so actually, I think we'll kind of leave the deep fake stuff out of it for now, and we'll just touch on the institutional knowledge. We were talking a little bit about this before we even got on the air.
Yeah, sure.
And because I think that's kind of timely with so many people exiting the workplace that are baby boomers that are retiring, and they're taking all that institutional knowledge with them. And so I've seen that affecting the aviation industry, and David's been seeing that affecting the education industry. So, and I'm pretty sure that's affecting every industry that's out there, whether it's construction, car mechanics. The old guy that works on the old hot rods, he's not there anymore. So it's like, so maybe we'll that kind of is something just about anybody can sort of relate to. So maybe you could tell us, David, about how the loss of institutional knowledge is affecting the schools, like just for a little bit here before we go.
Oh yeah, yeah. So, my dad was a school principal for 37 years, 35 years in the same building. So, those days are gone. I instruct aspiring school superintendents and principals. So I have a couple classes this fall. Those are legal matter classes, but usually these are like brand new superintendents, right? So I've had to adjust my classes more and more because you're also seeing younger superintendents, and as these superintendents come in, they'll share, 50% of my staff is new this year. They've gone to other districts, they've retired, right? Or someone's here on emergency license. They don't have teaching experience. You also have this phenomenon now of bidding between districts for teachers, especially in my area. So this actually happens. They'll say, we'll give you a $30,000 3-year bonus, but you got to stay here 3 years. We'll pay out $10,000 a
Wow.
year. And so you get this competitive stuff. I'm in outside of Dane County, so it's a very wealthy area. Dane County is like where I live, is specifically that, but like Our teachers get poached because, they get these big bonuses and these big benefit packages. Um, but the turnover is intense. So people who have gone through trainings of here's how we do a fire drill, here's what we do for tornadoes, here's what we do for students with food allergies, stuff like that. Um, those people might be gone next year. In principals last 2 years, superintendents last a little under 2 years, the turnover rate, and just teachers, it's
Wow.
about 4 years now. So I've had to change my approach, and I sit down with these new administrators and say, "Hey, the movie Moneyball, right? With what Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt, like watch that because you're putting together your 1 year team with the budget you have and whoever you can kind of get. We have 421 districts. Some of them are very rural. One's on an island, Washington Island. Um, so that's what you have to do, right? And what does it look like for safety? How do you bring people up to speed? One of the things, Graham, we shared, and I never did this until last year. I kind of just picked this up organically. So it's a little Dave thing, right?
Mm,
And I bring in Post-it notes to class. So we're at the university, right? And I said, okay, during the first break, I want everybody to take a Post-it note and put it on the fire extinguisher in the hallway. And people are like, oh, okay. So they go out and they have to kind of like find where this thing is. And then what I do, we come back in and I say, every principal at your first staff meeting of the year should have Post-it notes, and then as staff go back to their classroom, put a Post-it note on the fire extinguisher. Maybe you have a different color Post-it note, put it on the AED, because that person could be new, or maybe they've been there and they haven't paid attention to where these things are. Maybe they taught in a different building last year, now they're in this building. So that's like a quick activity right away, is the sticky note to inventory your safety assets.
mm.
Where's your fire alarm? Where's your fire extinguisher? Where's your AED? Where's your Narcan? We're starting to see that now in schools. So, that's like a good activity.
Mm.
But oh
Now,
my,
would you do that? You would have the new person coming in doing that.
I would have everybody do that. But if it was a brand new hire, it's also something I would add in for a new employee. But I would have because you have a lot of turnover. I would do this twice a year.
Mm,
Inventory your assets, right? So that's kind of the first thing, and it's really successful. I have the superintendents take pictures of it in their buildings, and then we bring it in class, and I say, present this to your school board, right? This is one way um, to help people understand at least where things are. But you're right. This institutional knowledge is gone, and professional discretion is real iffy. Like someone will be like, "I'm not sure I have permission to pull the fire alarm if I see smoke under the door." Like that hasn't been explicitly shared with them, or there's possibly a school intruder, right? I don't know if I have authority to activate the alarm, or do I have to like contact this person or whatever. So the professional discretion suffers when you have turnover, because people who
mhm.
have been there a while, they're like, okay, I know I should do this. And um, so
And
those are
then
things you have to address.
and so so a solution a solution to that problem, you kind of put that in School of Errors, if I'm interpreting it right, is that if you can keep all your fire drills, or keep the systems kind of meta or more general, not so specific, and then they'll be able to uh, see, how do we put that? So it would be able to adapt to the changes better in the institutional knowledge if it's more of a kind of like a general safety attitude, or
Yeah, yeah. I like.
general general areas, rather than like, okay, or so, if I remember correctly, it was something like like if you're doing a fire drill, what happens if one of the doors, the students always go out the nearest door. What if that's blocked by smoke or fire or something like that?
Whoa, Graham, this fire engine just showed up. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, vary the time and when you're doing drills. So in School of Airs, I worked as an administrator at the Wisconsin School for the Blind. We had a 2 alarm fire at the start of lunch on a Friday.
Oh yeah, I remember
And
reading
and
about that. Yeah.
so, first of all, people thought it was a faulty sensor, but then actually it was a dryer, industrial dryer, had started on fire, and the thing was, like, we had drilled at, and they had dorms there, so we had drilled at 8 at night, right? If there was something, or the morning, or in between breaks. And the thing was, like, um, your everything is laminated to context and time. So if you're in a hallway, you have to make that decision. If you're out on a playground, you have to make that decision. um, know what's around you. And it's this whole thing too, like I wrote about, called simulated annealing. Make a decision to, like, get yourself away from the building, and then when you're away from the building, make another decision. Should I go over here to the sidewalk? Should I try to, like, meet up with these people? Like, always evaluate and make decisions. But these whole things are like flip charts. I think the flip chart stuff is really crazy. I worked with a district once that, if this honestly was in the flip chart, airplane falls from sky. I'm not making that up. It was a school in California. And I said, does this
Well, won't
happen?
be me.
I'm like, does this happen a lot? And they're like, well, no, but, and I said, well, don't have this in here, because, and it weren't near an air. It was a really odd thing. Um, so you have to evaluate your situation, and then it's this whole thing too, as an administrator, a school turnover, people have to know they have your back. In 1958, there was a fire in December of 1958, Our Lady of Angels School in Chicago. And I believe 92 between staff and students perished in that fire. And that was the situation where the teachers, the nuns, identified the smoke. They knew there was a fire 10, 12 minutes before it kind of took over the building. And they were trying to find the principal or the sister in charge to pull the fire alarm, because they didn't feel they had authority to pull the fire alarm. So that's a great case study. People can look that one up. So by the time they did this, a lot of these students were unable to get out of the building. And it was simply because I don't want to get yelled at if I activated the alarm and I shouldn't have, or right, if I anything, tornado, if I use the AED. There's a lot of staff, believe it or not, that are very afraid to use the AED or first aid kit, because, oh, like, the AED is expensive. Now I've just used the batteries, and now I don't know how that's going to get. I mean, people worry about this. They think they're going to get in trouble.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
need to actually tell people it's okay. It's okay to use that. Or Narcan, right? Narcan is more common in schools today. If you administer that, or an EpiPen, where then you have to call 911 if a kid has an allergic reaction. And people are hesitant unless you overtly tell them. And Graham, one of the things is, I believe we should have a national or international, like, first aid week, where every state in Wisconsin, states go through their first aid and Good Samaritan laws, and let people know, because it's lawsuits are out there, and people get afraid, and my principal's not going to have my back, or my board's not going to have my back.
That's not a bad idea, because
It's a great idea.
Well, that's why you're the expert, man. But yeah, if you could think about it, it's just like everybody remembers there's a holiday. Okay, it's Labor Day. Now we go back to school or something. If you make it some kind of a thing, oh yeah, every year we do our first aid stuff.
Right.
It's the first Tuesday in November or something, and everyone just does it everywhere, and it's just it's just what we do. And it just becomes a habit, and just everyone will know. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I love
How
it.
do we get that? How do we
Well,
get people to do that?
and imagine, like, TV commercials, right? That, or ads that come up and say, hey, here, you live in,
Mm.
Windsor. Here's our Good Samaritan law. If you are somebody's been in a bike accident, or something like that, and you come up and you're trying to help them. Here's what our good. Nobody does that, right? Nobody
Yeah.
understands that. And I run a case study, which is awesome. We can wrap up after. So this case study is awesome, Greg. Every fall,
You're on a roll, man. Go for it.
I run this case study, and Wrench is saying, fire alarm spray ink on your hands. Those gosh darn fire alarms always trying to ruin your clothes. But no, here's a case study that I started to do like 5 years ago, and this is it's awesome to figure out where people's minds are at. So I do this in my class, and I present the scenario. So I get real animated and live the scenario out. And so I'm like, you are the principal at a rural elementary school where, there's like 150 kids and there's 200 people in the community. It's 10 miles to like the larger area. It's recess time, and aide comes in and says, a student just went into the woods, and I can't I don't know where they're at. They just went into the woods, and you're like, oh my God. Um, so you find out it's a student with autism, and they've wandered before, and they're into the woods now. And maybe there's this river in back of a wood. This actually happened in Wisconsin. This is based off a story one of my soups shared with me, and I had the article. So that's another thing when I do the class, I'm like, this actually happened. I'm not just like kind of making. So here's the deal. So you're the principal, right? Maybe you're a brand new principal, and maybe you have a lot of brand new staff. And you call this into 911. So like, how do you do that? There's nothing, you haven't practiced a rescue. You haven't practiced search. Does your liability cover staff if they walk off a school premise and get caught in barbed wire and cut themselves up and need a technician? I mean, all these goofy things, right? But the clock is ticking. So suddenly this guy runs up to you, and he's wearing the shirt, and it's like, I'm from Canada, so you kind of could trust him right there. You know, it's like a trust level baseline. But this guy runs up to you, and he says, I have a drone, and I can, in 1 minute, I can have this drone up in the air and helping. You're like, well, what's the deal? I heard it on the police scanner that you called in that you're looking for this kid. Boom. So you got this guy and this drone. You don't know who he is. And we stop right there. And the question is, do you accept this person's help as the administrator to help in this rescue, knowing that it could be 10 minutes before the first police car is there, this kid is out there? Do you accept the drone? And then, and I make people answer yes or no, and they have to turn it in on an index card, and, you know, they don't have to put their name. And you can't have conditions. Yes, but I would run a background check on him and all this stuff. You can't do that.
Really? They get into it that much, eh?
Oh God, they try to put so many conditions to like protect themselves. Man. I'm like, it's a yes or no question.
Yeah, it's like, go for it, kid.
Graham, over the years, it always splits 50-50. Always splits 50-50.
Really? That's interesting.
It is very interesting. And the people who say no, they're like, well, you know, it's not something we've practiced. It's not part of our policy. And okay, because I might get in trouble. The people that say yes, it's an available resource. If we can find the kid, because this guy has a drone with a camera and can feed back to, you know, his phone or iPad, yeah, I've got to make that decision. It's another asset. So we go through, and then, you know, at the end, they're like, what would you do, Dr. Perrodin? And I'm like, I would use the drone. I would accept the help. But then I have these things that come out afterwards. What if the guy was live streaming this the whole time? Or what if you find out a day later he's a felon, right? Like, how does that change things? And the thing is, from like my expert witness work, it doesn't change things, because in the moment, everything is laminated to time and context. That was the resource you had available. It was the right thing to do. Now people will challenge it, and the newspapers can make it look horrible. You know, like, felon, school invites felon.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, if the kid's found and the kid's in good shape, well, then that's good. Like I always tell people, right. Like how when it comes to flying, it's like, well, if you're safe back on the ground, you made the right decision. So if the kid's safe, right, you made the right decision.
And that's where then you talk about turnover and stuff. Like that principal needs to know their superintendent has their back, that they're not going to be reprimanded. If things get sticky, someone's going to step up for them. So that's like a big part of what I do in that class, is saying this whole legacy knowledge, institutional knowledge is eroded, and people need to know you have their back, and they have to trust that they have professional discretion. So, you know, those type of things come out. It's awesome.
So that's the type of work that you do normally. Didn't you say you have some classes like that? You do these case studies, and that's kind of coming up in September and stuff for you.
Yeah. So I teach aspiring school administrators who are seeking to be superintendents, principals, or directors of special education. So these are all university classes, and like in fall, I teach these in person. So, you know, I've done this for 20 years. This will be my 20th year doing it. You know, I'm licensed as a principal, special ed director, superintendent. I'm licensed in California also. So, so I have a lot of different experiences I can share. And then my students, you know, it's interesting. Some will be in a really small district, some will be in a big district. And we go through a lot of legal aspects. During COVID, we went through a lot of things like, do you mask, do you not mask? How do you make these determinations? And legally,
that's all done with.
Yeah. So like that was really interesting, because one of my students was sued. You know, the district, he was personally sued, plus the school board, for making a decision one way or another. So then it was all in the media, and I talked to him and said, what do you feel comfortable talking about, if anything, or we can just not talk about this? But he talked about how then, they had to document how they made the decisions, and the lawyers took copies of the hard drives, any
Ooh,
emails going out to staff. And that stuff just happens. Be aware of it. But yeah, discretion. And even in your own life, like people you work with, right? Like, how do they have discretion? Or at the airport, as a pilot, what
yeah.
discretion do you have to say no? Like,
See,
I
that's
have
one
to
of the
do that.
things in aviation that's been kind of worked out, unfortunately, through accidents over the years and stuff. How the pilot in command is always responsible of that plane, no matter what. So
And I
kind of
like that. That should be the
so,
comment going
and
to the principal for the building,
yeah,
right?
and it's
Yeah.
like, well, okay, and usually, and there's also a system there that's non-punitive, and I've talked to you about that before
You
too, where
did.
it's a non-punitive reporting system that's evolved over the years. Where, okay, I'm flying my airplane. I shouldn't have been flying in that bad weather, but I got caught in the bad weather. I cut somebody off to go in and land because my plane was icing up. Okay, I shouldn't have cut the guy off. I shouldn't have been in the weather. But the thing is, it's like as a non-punitive action. Am I safe on the ground? Yep. Is the plane okay? Yep. Okay. Let's look into how we can eliminate this in the future. So something like that. I
Graham,
don't know. It's been involved in aviation over the years.
yeah,
Just like
I think it's awesome.
culture, and I don't know. I think that's something that could be something that could end up going to schools or something that could
I
help.
agree. That's not the culture in schools. That is
Yeah. See, and
100%
that until
not
they
the
fix
culture.
that culture, it's probably going to be a problem. Well, that's what we got you here for, David. So, anyways, I'm just going to kind of
Yeah,
we'll kind of wrap it up on that.
sounds good.
We just solved all the world's problems right there in just a few seconds, and no one's
Wow.
ever going to get sued again.
Look at this. One of my students gave this to me last year. Had this mug made. One of my new superintendents,
Let's
because we go
take
through
it
discretion,
in.
best interests of the student, Board of Education policy, and induction is, or as you said, like turnover. Like
Oh,
these
okay.
are your 4 things you keep going over and over and over again as a leader. So,
Very cool.
which we talked about today. So,
Yeah.
and wrapping it up.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap it up. My absolute last thing I'm going to do here, and thanks to everybody for showing up in the chat. Okay, now I had a show where I was making a list of things to do, and I always like checking off lists. So number 2 on my list of things to do is do an airplane video. I didn't get that out in June. I got it out at the beginning of July, so we're going to cross that one out. The other thing on my list was to interview someone in July. So I just interviewed someone. So thanks, David. And I can scratch that off the list. Next up is doing a show live in Detroit. We'll see if that's coming up in August. And so thank you very much, David, for showing up here. And I'll kind of shut this down, but I'll have a little chit chat with you after, David. And so there we go.
All right, thank you, everyone.
I can do this in broadcast.
Thank you for having
I'll get this all
me.
professional.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for watching. Bye.